Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today I'm joined by Dr. Joanna Martin, who I've known for over a decade and consistently has been showing up in more and more inspiring ways. Her background includes qualifying as a medical doctor and working on oncology, traveling around the world building a seven-figure speaker training company, and founding a paradigm-shifting movement, one of many, which has reached over 100,000 women at least. So without further ado, Joanna, welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Thank you, Simon. I'm so thrilled to be here, and it's so great to reconnect with you again.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how time flies with lockdowns and travel and sort of the internet world. We're all connected, but sort of don't have those deep conversations sometimes. So let's start at the beginning. People listening in may not know you and haven't caught up with your recent resets. Who is Joanna and what are you focused on today?
Who is Joanna is one of the biggest questions. Isn't that what we try to figure out by the time we die? But I'll give you, the more human answer. I am a mum. That is a big part of who I am. I've got two kids. They're 10 and 6 at the time we're speaking today. And I am wife to Greg. I am also I trained as a doctor. That never gets out of your system. But I think fundamentally I am a change maker. I have an organization called One of Many, which is my calling incarnate, I suppose one might put it. And it is an organization supporting women, grassroots women leaders to sustainably change their corner of the world. I believe that in this day and age, we need more women at more tables to achieve all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to be honest, even though gender parity is only one of those. But I think if more women were at the tables, we'd be doing a far better job of these things. But the thing that gets in the way is that for a lot of us, it's exhausting. It's exhausting because we're still the ones that are having to buy the birthday presents, organize the plumber, do that kind of stuff and weigh the mental load at home. So I've created a space where we can have those frank conversations about both changing the world and the mundane shit that gets in the way of that occurring.
I love it how you can go from the simplicity or the reality of the kids to the sort of global goal shifting. And that's always been, I think, part of the challenge, right? Navigating those two worlds. And
absolutely.
So true. I've always grown up with very strong women, my mum, my cousins. So it's found fascinating when you hit not that, and that need of real community and collaboration is so vital. And it's especially hard when you've got those kids at that age you've got now, when they're not sort of in nursery, they want attention, they need time. And anybody, especially the woman who's trying to build the business. A lot of single women I know, separated partners, are trying to build, looking after their kids, and navigating that can be a real challenge.
It is. It's interesting, just on a coaching call this morning, we were talking, in the one breath about a woman who's shifting her organization. She's got 130,000 people in her organization. She's rolling out coaching programs and a coaching kind of culture inside that organization, doing profound work. And her biggest challenge this week is it's summer holidays and she's got to juggle the kids. So it's that interplay between, managing all of life as well as these huge ambitious goals that we have to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and in a world where there's sort of the celebrity version online makes you think the world's a certain way, but it isn't always that. So
very rarely, in my experience.
Let's go into the depth a little bit. So if you look back on your life till now, what's the biggest shifts and resets you've been through? Yeah,
that's such a great question. I would say, I've had a couple big career resets. I trained as a medical doctor and left all of that behind to go to drama school. That was my first big, massive reset. And that was actually provoked by the loss of a patient of mine. She was someone I connected with very rapidly and very deeply on the ward. She was only a few years older than me. She had kids, young kids. And she came in just for kind of reassessment and doing some monitoring, we thought. But it turned out, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that she was on a downward spiral. And after about 10 days in hospital, she took a really bad turn for the worse. And within 48 hours had passed away. She held on for 24 hours until her brother and sister-in-law flew out from Ireland to be with her. And then she was unconscious that whole time, but her whole family were together with her, along with her little kids and her husband. They were all together in the room. And then after about an hour of togetherness, she let go, which was quite profound. And for me as a junior doctor, as I was at the time, it was a really profound moment, which caused me to reflect a lot on my own life. I didn't know this woman really well, but there was a very deep grief in her loss. But it also triggered a big reset moment for me, because I did have this realization that all of us have got a time limit. Most of us don't know what that is. But I thought, God, if I had a diagnosis, if I knew that there was as I was counting down the days, weeks, months, even years, would I be doing what I'm doing right now? And back then for me, the answer was absolutely not. I was a very good doctor, and I was well liked by patients and nursing staff and the rest of the team, but it wasn't my calling. I was making a difference, but I knew I wasn't making my difference in the world. So the night after her passing, I was doing some journaling, and I made a couple of resolutions for myself. I said, I'm going to either direct a play, because drama had been a big part of my life up until then, or at the end of this year, my intern year, I was going to audition for drama school. And as it turned out, I did both. And I got into a great drama school, and I moved up to Sydney and started that career. So that was kind of one of the biggest resets I've had. I think probably it was the toughest one, because it was the first big one. But having made that, I have gotten very good over the years at listening deeply to what my heart or intuition is calling me to, and getting the signs or getting the nudges that provoke resets. I left drama school after 18 months because I've discovered coaching. That was a tougher career change, not the reset per se, but it was a tougher career change, because I was moving from something that I loved to something I loved even more. Going from medicine to drama was from something I didn't like to something I loved, but from something I loved to something that was even more aligned. That was tough. And then, I've been in the coaching and training industry now since 2003. And then the next big reset for me, I think, was with the birth of my son, James. So that was 10 years ago. And it was, up until then, I'd been doing quite a bit, this is how you and I met originally, supporting speakers, helping them with the business side of things and growing and making their impact in the world in a way that was smart and profitable. But it was when James was born that I had... You hear a lot of spiritual types talk about getting a download, which never made any sense to me. But I was breastfeeding James in a dark room at one point at the 6-week mark. And I literally had that experience where I went, oh, my word. I'd read a quote by the Dalai Lama, which was that the world would be saved by the Western woman. I think he said it at the Vancouver Peace Summit in 2009. And I remember thinking originally, he means, the Hillary Clintons and the Theresa Mays and the Kamala Harrises of the world, But in that moment, I thought, oh, no, he means me and my neighbor and my sister and my mom and my grandmother, grassroots women who can change their corner of the world. But then as I thought about all of those people, myself included at that time, I thought we're all tearing around like headless chickens, where there's no world changing occurring. We're busy with a lot of stuff. There's no spaciousness to be considering how to move the world forward positively. So if this is true, and the Dalai Lama is pretty damn enlightened, so I kind of figure, there's some truth in that statement. We need a space for women to be able to find space, to be able to step up to ever greater levels of impact inside their organizations or through their businesses or in their leadership capacity, whatever that is, but without burning out, without exhausting ourselves, and handling that juggle day to day. So that was the birth of One of Many. I couldn't do anything about it because I had a 6-week-old. But after about 9 months, we launched. We did the founding work for what is now One of Many. And when James had his first birthday, we moved over back to the UK, and I launched it in the September of that year. And that has been the most recent big reset.
Yeah, and the rest is history. What I noticed with that, there was a whole different energy to it, right? That seemed to take on a different momentum, different growth, different tone, and apt to what we need today. And the reason I laughed when you mentioned downloads, yeah, I've had a few of those. And if you haven't had one yet, it's okay. They're not like a thing to get a cookie having. There's something about them when you have one of those, it isn't a normal thought. It's like, that was different.
Yes, that's it. There's like, it almost... it doesn't, but it feels like it comes with the cherubs tooting and, big fingers pointing at it, doesn't it? It's like, oh, okay, I'm paying attention. Got it.
Yeah, and you touched on it. The other question I had when you were sharing a little about your background and what you've been through, because to become a doctor isn't like a one-day training course, right? That in the UK, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Did you find that easy? One of the questions we have is, about pausing, stopping, reset. Which do you find hardest? Was it a build up to that point? Or once you started, you keep your head down and you'll do what it do. I know you're very committed at sort of seeing things through, right? So
yeah, of those three, to your question, which is the hardest? Stopping is the hardest for me. Like stopping something which I've said I will do has always been and is very difficult. So it wasn't an easy transition. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor in year 11 of school.
Wow.
So, however, I'd been saying I want to be a pediatrician since the ripe old age of 6 when I learnt the meaning of the word. And when you have 2 parents who are pharmacists, I was never pushed into it, but it was a very celebrated choice, And so I knew it at the age of 16 that it wasn't medicine that was my calling, but I was very smart. I was blessed with a good intellect. And I was also a performer. And to get through med school, you need 2 things, a really good memory and the ability to make it look like you know what you're doing, right? If there's a performance to how you do a medical assessment, especially at the beginning when you really don't know exactly what you're listening for with those stethoscopes on. As long as you got your stethoscope in the right place and you know the statistics, you can get your way through med school, certainly, not much further than that, to be fair. But for me, therefore, I had everything I needed to be a doctor. I went on my gap year pretty certain I didn't want to go to med school, but I was still traveling, and my mum applied for me while I was away. She forged my signature on the application papers. She did ask my permission, said, I know you don't really know what you want to do, Jo, but I've got the papers here from uni. Do you want me to submit you for medicine? I'm like, yeah, okay. This was back before we had to do interviews and all that stuff. Yeah. Like it's evolved since then. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I got in. And I did my first year of medicine, and I thought, this is not for me. This is not it. But at that stage, you could graduate from medicine and go be a GP straight away. And I thought, well, I may as well do these 6 years, get a career behind me, and then I can just go be a GP and then do drama, which is what my heart wanted to do, right? But then again, they changed the rules whilst I was when I was in second year. You couldn't then just go be a GP. You had to do another 4 years training to be a GP. So I got through my intern year and then I went, you know what? No, the time has come. So to answer your question, it took me from the age of 16 to the age of, what must I have been? 23. So 7 years, I guess, to or more, 8 years really it was, to decide that I wasn't going to, that I was going to change that direction, to do that reset. That was a real turning of the Titanic. It took time.
Yeah.
The decision to go from drama school to coaching full-time was a term, it was one term of school. And the decision to launch One of Many was in a moment. So I think the more we reset, the easier it gets, because you do it and you realize that I'm not going to say no failure. Don't get me wrong. I've failed a ton of times, that things haven't worked out. But when you're listening to something within, if it's a calling, it never doesn't work out. It just takes a different form than what perhaps you might have envisaged it would. And so over the years, I've learned to rely quite deeply on those nudges and things. So I find resetting much easier than, in a business context. Just this last year has been a chapter for me of having to stop a bunch of things that weren't actually scalable in the business, or that we weren't doing a great job of them. But God, it was really hard, even though we knew we weren't doing a good job of them, just to say, actually, we're not going to do that anymore because we do a bad job of it, or we're not going to do that anymore because it doesn't help us fulfill on the mission. If I've said to people, this is who we are and what we do, I find it really hard to then stop, even though it's the right thing from a business or a calling perspective. It's really interesting.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that so openly and reeling. I was nodding away. That was me at uni. I'm not doing a master degree, did the master degree, not working in banking, a decade in banking. You end up falling into things because you're smart. And there's this thing about integrity and commitment and keep your word. And it's really that how you described it is so true. And especially one of the kind I reached out to you about recently was female authority scaling. And one of the reasons most don't is they get into, but I can't let down those old clients or that way of working, which was great back then, but it's never going to get where you're going to go to next. And with what's happening today in the world of technology, with the systems changing, so much of what we need 2, 3, 4 years from now is not what's been going. Even the podcast, you and I are recording a podcast today. I'm still going, will anybody listen to podcasts in a few years with AI, chat GPT things going on? I don't know. But you don't know. But in the being able just to recognize that. So having that clear story from you, I think is really helpful for listeners. And also from the outside, you tend not to see those bits of the story. You don't seem to, you sort of see the happy stuff that goes on and nothing else. So it's really
true. And I think, one of the things that I try very much to do is God, I don't share every little thing that goes wrong, because I think, God, there are some, social media channels out there that you think, Jesus Christ, you could have kept that one to yourself. I'm always very alarmed by people revealing their medical injuries, pictures of, I'm like, I didn't need to see that. But I think it's really important to share that which is challenging and difficult for us as authorities in a space. It is, because every single time I share something that hasn't worked out or a difficulty that I'm having, I have someone who comes up to me and says, "Oh, it's so good to hear that someone like you has this stuff go on as well." I'm like, Jesus Christ, of course. Nobody has it all figured out, and we have to. I think it's our responsibility as leaders and educators and people that are supporting people in the world to share that we haven't got it all together. Otherwise, I think that we are doing our clients or our community members a disservice, because they're experiencing life being challenging every day. They're experiencing difficulty parenting their kids right alongside difficulty with, the increased mortgage payments, difficulty with launching their new product, difficulty stopping. I had a client recently who one of my mastermind members, who, just as you said just now, Simon, she was struggling to stop a £37 a month program that she only had 12 people in, because they'd been in it since the beginning and they were her people that helped her get started, in order to start a £500 plus month program, of which most of those people have now transitioned into the £500 plus per month program. But she was really struggling with it, because she was like, oh God, I don't know how to stop, because we don't, as business leaders, talk about, well, this was really difficult and I've stopped that now for this reason and we're shaping it this way, or where, we just kind of do things quietly or don't share it. So I think it's really important that we share that stuff. And I know in her case, seeing my journey over this last 12 months was one of the pieces where I said, yeah, it's going to be awkward. And some of those people won't like you or won't like the change because they've been getting something fabulous for a while, but it doesn't serve you or the impact the organization can have overall to keep going with it. And so you've just got to be courageous and do it. And of course, then she did, and nothing fell apart, and it gets easier. But I think we've got to share all of it, because otherwise people think that we've got it all together, and it's because we've got it all together that we're successful. It isn't. It's because we're absolute basket cases. We know we're absolute basket cases, and we try and find the way every day like everybody else.
And this is why we love you. Honestly, it's why I was keen to get you on the show, because there's so much of these sort of toxic psycho guru worlds that you and I know more about the behind the scenes of those people, but they'd never tell you that bit. But if you knew, it's the whole thing. And keeping the happy, positive energy for today. So like over your life journey, you've obviously met people, trained people, read things. What's the most important lesson you wish you could give your younger self, and why?
I reckon I've answered that question so many different ways depending on the day. So let's talk about today's lesson. Today, I think I would tell that it's less a lesson and more I would want to reassure her it's all going to be okay. I think that's what I would want my younger self to know. I was so afraid. I still am. I still have a lot of fear, I would say, in my life. Like I worry how things are going to turn out, especially now I'm a mother. I worry about how things are going to turn out quite a lot. And if I were to grab my younger self by the ears, I would just want to say, it's going to be all right. You are going to impact people in a way you can't even imagine right now. You're going to meet a lovely fella. That was a big stress I had when I was a kid.
Greg you're going to have lovely, annoyingly. He's a lovely chap.
He is. He's amazing.
There's good days and bad days, but he's one of those. He's great at that. I think that sort of operational supporter role. That's what I always saw him. And the you as well, right?
Oh, totally. And here we are, we had I don't even know what anniversary we're up to, but we've been working together now since 2008. So, he's incredible. I'm so blessed. And I guess just knowing that there's nothing you can fuck up so badly that you can't recover from it, that if you're human and humble when you let people down, that you're going to be okay. So I would like to tell her it's all going to be okay. I had this flashback actually on the weekend, so when I was training, and I had that moment where I went, yeah, because I've been doing this and I clocked it. I started in 2003 and it's now 20 years. Yep. And it made me remember I was sitting in Brisbane in a bar with one of my colleagues. He was my event manager at the time. Was he my event manager? He must have been. And it was like one of the first trainings that I had run for this organization that I was training for back then. And I was so nervous. I had my big sale the next day and I was terrified it was all going to go terribly wrong. But I remember having this moment of insight, looking out over the dark Brisbane River with the lights in the background. I said to him, you know what, mate, we are going to get to a point in 20 years where we're going to be the old hands in this industry. We're not going to be the new kids on the block anymore. And we're going to look back on this moment and laugh. And I'd completely forgotten about it until I was on stage and it dawned on me that it had been 20 years. And I remembered this conversation I'd had with him. I spoke to him just recently, actually. And I thought, Jesus, there you go. I've been doing this now 20 years. And there's I've done some great things and I've done some not so great things. I've helped some people and I've let people down, and I hate that. It's usually bloody systems and processes that let people down rather than the what we do. But still, it lets people down. And recognizing that there's nothing that you can't overcome. It's all going to be okay, provided you meet the other human as a human and you apologize and you be awkward and you be brave. Nothing's insurmountable.
I really love that for so many reasons. including the one about systems. We had some WordPress sites be hacked yet again. And it's like, I've been at this stuff 25 years. It shouldn't be happening, but it does. And it's when you realize like 1 million WordPress apps were hacked in the last 24 hours, and your brain just goes, come on, guys, we're clever. But it isn't that 20 years thing. I started 2001. I did a workshop in London, and that sort of started me on my next phase of journey, the weekend after 9/11. And it's scary when not scary, daunting, shifting when you realize it's been 20 years. You may not have come across in the Tai Chi Chuan stuff I studied. It was minimum 20 years to be a teacher, to be a master. And it was only after 20 years, I started to realize stuff I didn't realize was even knowable or learnable at the beginning. 20 years into teaching, you've watched your students go through those journeys and changes and systems. You've been through those 2 decades. It sort of starts to begin the new game. And very interesting timing, I think, because also the work you and others have been doing around female collaboration, it's just female, but then how to label it these days. There's a shift about people being human, being helpful and being real, and actually making a difference that isn't just pay for more curries and pay for more cans of coffee and things. There's a different need in the world that is sort of hopefully what's coming on. And it isn't just more and more stuff. I don't think. I think it's less stuff, but more effective, maybe. Who knows? We shall see. One of the questions I have, one of the things I notice is we have these dark nights of these souls. We have these challenging resets. And I'm curious what helped you through yours. I know for me, sometimes it's books and movies, talking to friends and family, but I'm just curious what it is that helps you navigate your challenging reset times.
Yeah, I think as I think back over those reset times, there's always been a book at the center of it. The first one, getting the courage to go from med school to drama school was prompted by Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And it is a book that I recommend to this day. I still pull out her exercises. I still write my morning pages. I encourage all of our clients to write morning pages. I also give them permission for it to not be in the morning, because most busy mums, get woken up by a toddler crawling into bed with them, and the last thing you can do is take the time to write 3 pages first thing in the morning. But that journaling habit, I think, is still critical. So I really credit Julia Cameron with who I am, with how I am in the world. Without that book, I would not have found the relationship with my inner voice that I discovered. And it is my inner voice that guides me through all of this. So I'm really grateful to her and to that book for that. It has been really profound. I've just been through, it's not particularly a reset, but definitely a healing chapter recently. And I've been reading a book called Hollywood to the Himalayas by a woman called Sadhvi Bhagavati Saraswati, who I had the great pleasure of meeting just a few weekends ago. And I have to say, coming out of the business context, or even the creative context, which is where I do a lot of my reading ordinarily, and into a more spiritual context to look at to look through the lens of what's going on for me in my life at the moment, and harnessing my next chapter, hearing it through this spiritual lens of a woman who, her story is incredible. She was a PhD student in Los Angeles, the very well-to-do parents, from Hollywood. I think her dad was like a Hollywood divorce lawyer kind of person. And she was married and traveled to Rishikesh with her husband because her husband wanted to find this spiritual guru. She had absolutely no inclinations towards that. She was troubled with her own traumas. She had eating disorders and things, had no interest in all of that, but went with her husband. But when she arrived in Rishikesh, she walked down to the river, to the Ganges, and put her feet in the Ganges and basically had a spiritual experience, like was blessed and saw, what she describes now as God, the river, the Mother Ganga, as goddess, and just was very floored by this experience. And then started following her guru that she met at an ashram not too far from there. who helped her kind of make sense of it all and ground it. And she's obviously never didn't return to Hollywood. She stayed there and devoted her life to service, and is so grateful for that. And that has been reading of this woman who, not unlike me in so many ways, and able to live her life through the lens of a spiritual practice, has been quite a profound new lens through which to experience my work. We're coming up to, we'll be in business 10 years with One of Many next year. And like you just said, we're seeing a lot of those clients come out through a 10-year journey with us, learning lots more right back at the beginning. And post-COVID, I mean, we were an events company. So we were an events company that had to go online. There was a lot of, now looking back, I'm going to call it trauma. I had to turn a conference around in 36 hours. We were due the weekend before lockdown to have 400 women in a conference room in London. And Boris Johnson went into his first, Cobra meeting or whatever they were called during the time. We were waiting on that Thursday night for him to come out and tell us whether or not we should be running the conference. And it took all day. During that day, I listened to my inner voice and I went, no, I am not going to put 400 breadwinners, carers, and, mothers in a room together, even if he's not brave enough to make this call. Until we know more, I'm not going to do it. So we decided 36 hours, that was Thursday afternoon. We were due to start on Saturday morning. I got my team together. I said, we're not going to do it. We're going to do it online. And we'd never done an online event, not just a Zoom. We'd done lots of Zoom stuff before, but not delivering a powerful event online the way we would have. I mobilized that team. And we created so many miracles in that 36-hour period of time, which was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We had 2,000 people join us from all over the world in the end. We threw the doors open. My AV team made a TV studio in my barn, converted barn office. It was unreal. So it was very much guided by source, I'm sure. But we did find during that pandemic time in our community, we supported them so well, but it was exhausting, being in lockdown with no home help. Greg and I both in the business, we did 5-hour shifts in the business each, and 5-hour shifts, it was 8-hour shifts with the kids out around that. It was exhausting. So the last sort of 3 years for me has been, both getting the organization through that, getting our community of women who have had massive challenges through that period. Some women in our community got locked down with their abusers. There was a lot going on at that time that needed help and support, working from home with where so much unconscious bias around gender sort of started to be noticed, which we hadn't seen before when we just went to work. It was quite profound. So I've got to say it was exhausting. And I kind of came out of this after, I've come out of a chapter now, or I'm transitioning out of a chapter in this last kind of 12 months where it's been, okay, now it's time for me to kind of put myself back together again. I got us all through it. Now I need to take a moment for myself. So that book has been a real balm, and also meeting them a few weekends ago, a real balm to help me see this calling that I have through the lens of blessing again. I think the last 3 years I had a little moment where it started to feel really, it was always my calling, but there was a heaviness around getting us through it. Do you know? And that just in recent weeks and months has been completely lifted by this book and by meeting these people. And yeah, I think when things get heavy, tough, or difficult, I start reading avidly. And not every book hits the mark, but I'll usually find a book where and it might just be 1 or 2 lines in it. And it certainly was in this case, that just shift my lens completely and allow one of those paradigm shift moments that allows you to kind of enter a new chapter.
Yeah, and we haven't said it today, but it's a word I'm sure you're familiar with, ontology, this sort of the beingness of being a human, not the doing. It is that heaviness about it. isn't always the thing. It's where we get our sort of internals get skewy. And I said it very clearly earlier, most of us haven't been born into an environment where there's no fear. We have this fear of earning enough and doing good and showing off and being right and being smart and all that fiery stuff. And it sort of zaps the joy out of it. And it's the thing I've noticed most between, there's some great successful people that aren't actually successful. I've been that myself at times where what I was doing was great, but internally wishing I wasn't doing it. And at other times wishing I was doing it happily for 3 days at length with no stop. So there's a balance point. And, I love how you touched on with the book. Sometimes you get one line, one sentence. I find that with movies often. They'll say something, you go, they couldn't have just made that up, right? There's a little, Truman Show going on here sometimes. But no, it's so vital. And it's why it's so helpful to share stories. And India, actually, I've been out to Mumbai, not out to Rishikesh yet, but it's a beautiful shifting place, the experience of India, not the story about it, right? Have you been out to India much yourself yet?
I've not. I've never been. It's one of those places I've had a calling to visit since I was about 16, and I've never activated on that. It was very interesting because I met this guru of a friend of mine. That's how we ended up there a few weeks ago. I teach my kids a few mantras and things because I've been doing yoga since I was 18. But my daughter was chanting a mantra as part of the ceremony that we're doing at this thing, and anyway, Swamiji said to her and then to us, "You must come to Rishikesh." I feel now I've got the invitation, do you know? So the plan is October half term next year. We're going to go out and visit the ashram and take the family because we had a really beautiful family experience around it. And maybe that's why it took so long. Maybe it was because this was my calling to India was to be called as a mother of this incredible young girl that happened to have been born to me, as opposed to my calling. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm very much looking forward to it.
Definitely some friends in Mumbai to introduce you. The thing that I was most shocked by was the London story of making a difference, right, to the homeless person on the Strand. And then you see the reality in Mumbai and the scale of the challenge. We haven't touched on the Hunger Project much, but we know Kathy and people like that, and the reality of it, not the story about it, right? Not the accountancy numbers, but the human side. And also there is this great wealth of real power, not force, as they say in the Power versus Force, but of women collaborating together around the world that is really quite extraordinary. I'm going to go on the soapbox. I'll be good. And we'll pause, stop, reset, and back on the conversations. Some people listening in may almost certainly be looking to make a shift in what's possible for their lives. Some may be going through challenging times. Some may be having success stories, wanting to shift that as well, right? What would be your biggest suggestions for somebody who's looking to do a pause, stop, reset, to do a shift for the better?
Spaciousness. I think that the length of that pause needs to extend until you can hear or feel, or however you relate to that voice inside of you, the next step. So I think a lot of us try to plan our way into the next iteration of something. We rely very heavily on our logic brains to solve problems. But if the last few years have taught us anything, and certainly I've seen this with women in my community, but I'm sure it is not specific to our biological makeup. But there's been a ton of executive function fatigue. If you think about it, going to the supermarket, these days we're back there now. Going to the supermarket is just a decision to go to the supermarket, right? But then when we hit COVID, going to the supermarket, you had to make about 20 or 30 additional decisions before you even got there in those early days of, when's the best time? Which one will I go to? Because will they have the stuff I need? Do I wear gloves or do I not wear gloves? Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear gloves? What will other people think? What do I think? What's the truth of that? Am I going to quarantine my groceries outside of my house before I bring them into my house? Like all of the little tiny things, which used to be automatic pilot. An automatic pilot is a blessing for us, right? Automatic pilot is awesome because it means we don't have to think about the mundane of life. We just do it so that we have our executive function, which is a fatigable resource. There's so much research to show this. our executive function is available then for more of those higher level strategy, life affirming, life changing things that we want to do, or problem solving that we want to achieve. The last 3 years, though, have knackered that executive function. We've used it up on groceries, on childcare, on sorting our way through, working out how to do our jobs online, rather than in offices. Yes, of course, things are starting to return back to how things looked slightly before COVID arrived, but the executive function fatigue persists, is what I'm seeing in huge members of the community. And many of us are experiencing, very similarly to what I've experienced personally, experiencing this, well, we got through it and now things are all right. And I'm taking a breather and recognizing just how exhausted I am. And I don't know what needs to change here. So if you're looking to make change in any way, I think the first ingredient has to be spaciousness, giving yourself space, whether that be a regular evening walk where you're not listening to a podcast, where you're not, listening to music as well, where you're just with you and your thoughts, or whether it's meditation, or whether it's a bath where you're not also watching something on Netflix or reading a book, but you're just being with yourself, or a journaling practice. Spaciousness to tune into your inner guidance, because there is an intuition, there is a knowledge base available inside you beyond your logic brain, which is, I believe, the key to giving you the clues and the kernels that make a real difference, In our work, we talk about 5 women's power types. And when we have access to these 5 women's power types, we have access to, and they're exactly the same for masculine energy people as well. But the 5 we talk about are the warrioress, the lover, the mother, the queen, and the sorceress. And most of us are really great, especially professional women that I tend to work with. They're really great at warrioress and mother, looking after everybody else and getting shit done. But the one that we oftentimes don't give enough space to when we want to make change is sorceress energy, that part of us that connects to our source, whether we call that God or Allah or Jesus, or whether we call that our intuition, our higher self, or the universe, the cosmos, whatever we call it. But if we can give space to that, if, your inner sorceress, your inner magician, if your masculine energy makes more sense for you, that inner part of you, the wise man or woman, that part of you knows already what is maybe not the whole thing. You might not be able to see the whole vision of what's about to unfold, but you can feel into that next first right step. And with spaciousness, it all untaps. So I coach spaciousness. I advise spaciousness. I celebrate spaciousness.
Super love that. And so my happiest moment sitting down by a tree over lockdown, when I sort of got forced to sit there. You couldn't run around in meetings anymore. So it's really good to get in nature and have those space times. Hard when you're in the stress times. So find a way to do that even for a few minutes.
Definitely.
Coming up to the end of the show, we've got a couple more questions to go, if that's okay. And one, I think, you've done lots of work on yourself. One of the things I like is tangible actions. If somebody's listening to right now and they have one takeaway, one action to go do, they go, Joanna said, what's their sort of Joanna said moment?
I'd have to piggyback off what I've just said. Make a habit of space for your intuition. Make a habit of providing space. So we talk a lot about creating a needs creed, which is understanding your basic needs. We have basic needs we don't even take care of, like good food, water, move your body, get enough sleep, the basics. But one of them that often gets overlooked, even if we are aware of it, is alone time or space to connect inwardly. I would not be where I am having impacted as many people around the world with 20 coaches with coaches in 20 different countries, and a business that doesn't completely exhaust me and is sustainable. If I didn't make that time, for me, it looks like evening walks and journaling predominantly. They're my 2 kind of key access points. But what is it for you? And make it then a habit. Make it your first priority for the day, the cause of your activity, not the reward for doing your activity. I think it's a critical piece.
Love that. I'm sure some people listening in will want to find more about what you do. What's the best way for them to connect with you? JoannaMartin.com, I'm guessing.
Well, if they're interested in just finding out more about me, JoannaMartin.com is kind of my website for consulting and speaking and so forth. We've spoken a lot about one of many, and if you're a woman who is looking to increase your impact without burnout, it's a beautiful community. So you can find out more about that at oneofmany.co.uk. And most of the social media platforms we're on as well. So both as One of Many and Dr. Joanna Martin.
Awesome. I've really enjoyed reconnecting today and learning some of the bits that I'd never heard before, which always happens in these shows, in these conversations. It's like, I didn't know that about you. It's kind of good. I really love the reminder what's really most valuable for me, the takeaways being the reminder we need more women at the table. And we know that, but we need that. And it's so important for so many reasons today. That we get to choose how we make our difference. And the value of the practice of journaling in that book by Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. And my last one from you, which was, if you're human and humble, when you let people down, it's all going to be okay. If you're human and humble, when you let people down, it's all going to be okay. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up the show today?
No, that sounds like a beautiful place to finish. Just to say thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for the space to dive in. It's been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege. You're one of the people I know has helped a lot of other people on their journeys, many of which don't go around raving about you the way they should or could. But you've been one of those difference makers, a real change maker over decades, and it shows up in ways people often forget and don't realize. And that's often what it's about. How do you make the difference, I think, one little ripple at a time. If you've enjoyed the show, do check out JoannaMartin.com, and we'll see you next time for more Pause Stop Reset. Bye for now. Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause Stop Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value, and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pausestopreset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember, you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.